Hey everybody, it's the Weird and the Wise here. I'm Stephanie, and we have Tim and Cassie, and we want to talk today about channeling and maybe normalize it a little bit, or just talk about what it is for us, and just start start chatting about it. So I'm wondering if anything is present for you guys.
I like the idea of normalizing it because I think there's a lot of, what would you say, a stigma? Is it stigma the right word? A stigma with that word, this idea that it's this metaphysical connection to something, and and maybe it is, but also I think there's this idea of like flow state or yeah, being so present that you're just have that singular focus with something. And when you're in that space, your critical thinking mind is offline a little bit in a way that you're able to bring these things through without the criticisms or out the self-doubts or the that voice that tells us what we can and can't do. I mean, it's that place of like bringing in creation, something from that abstract realm of manifestation or possibility, and rooting it in the world in some way or another, either through talking or creating art or playing music or whatever that is, or cooking an incredible meal, or being in a time bubble with a friend. Like, it's like, where do we, yeah, how do we define what channeling is and isn't? I guess that's my question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly notice it myself, and I have for years and didn't even know what it was through creativity. And really, I mean, if you think about it, when you're creating something, it's something like that has never been born before, and something like that will never be born again because, I mean, even if you try to recreate it, you can't.
Mm-mm.
And and I think the more that we can sort of get into that heart space and drop down into the heart space and into that flow state, that it's just pretty magical what happens, you know. And for me, you know, creating and doing process art, which is a little different than just making a pretty picture, you know, it's creating for just the sheer act of creating and feeling into your body and all of that. And you know, I think I have been channeling for a very long time and haven't known it, just because it's just, it looks differently. It looks different, I should say, than some of the stuff that you see online, you know, which is people just bringing in words and maybe is it trans channeling where, yeah, and it just felt very different. And so I didn't even know I was doing it, but now I know I am. I know
It
I am.
brings up a really interesting question. Like, Cassie, how do you relate to channeling? Because I even that word trans channeling, that's something that resonates for you a little bit, right?
Right. Yeah, a couple things came in. I keep seeing Bruce Lipton talks a lot about like when we're not in harmony. And I think about channeling as being in harmony. And like animals, when it's like that good vibe, bad vibe energy, when the animals, go to a flower and they're like, oh, that's not for me, they know to move to something else because they're staying in present time energy. And I think that so often we're out of time. It's like depression, we're living in the past, and anxiety, we're living in the future. And how do we come into the present moment? Because that's where all channeling takes place. And I've been a dancer my whole life. And so one of the ways that I channel is through dancing. I'm in real time, I'm in my body. And I have so many notebooks of when I start dancing, how much information comes through me. Like it's like automatic writing. I have the ideas, they're just coming in. And that is one way that I really have came to understand that what I'm doing is channeling through dance and writing.
Automatic writing is an interesting one too. Have this exercise of asking, like, if you have a question that you want to be answered, uh, asking that question and then just starting to write. And so because so often our response to something that we're dealing with is I don't know. And that's that critical voice that shuts you down or closes the channel or whatever. But if you were to pretend or imagine that you did, what kinds of things might you say? And maybe for me that's part of that channeling is like there is some farther removed part of us that observes all of the narratives that we're attaching to all the stories that we're telling, and it sees the arc of our life, or maybe even on a spiritual level the arc of our soul's journey, whatever that would be, without all of that attachment. And then that idea of, well, what maybe I do know. Yeah, this Tim that's here right now may not know, but there's some part of me that can see all of the pieces and how they line up and how they move together. And if I just pretend that I'm connected to that and start writing, it's amazing the things that will come out.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal. It's a big thing to mention because I mean, we all have that piece of us, that the deep wisdom that we all have. We all do know. And it's just about dropping into the heart space, quieting the chatter and tapping in. And it I feel like that's such a big part of what we're moving into is all of us becoming empowered through that wisdom.
It
We can all do it in some way.
is children, I do so much inner child work with people, and I bring that to the forefront of like, why was it so magical? Well, because we were in the present moment. A lot of the time we were channeling because we were embodied in present time. We were being creative and imaginative, and we were going on adventures, and everything was wondrous, and I think how often, where did we lose that? Where did it go away? And how can we bring it back into our lives through creativity, through dance, through, working with whatever stands in the way in our subconscious? It can be really fascinating, what we don't know is available in other parts of us. It's like that we only know 5%, we're only using 5% of who we are. That's not like, every time I say that, it's like I don't even believe myself saying it because it's just like, what? It's like
Right.
Deepak Chopra saying, we only see 1.6% of what's in this room right now. Like that's how untapped we are as humanity, which is fascinating to me.
I've been thinking a lot about that idea of how there's the reality, well, there's our experience of reality, the things that the day to day that we're moving through that's dictated in so many ways by our automatic programming, our beliefs, our life scripts, our associations, all of those things that we were told when we were younger, like even with the magic that we would experience, how many times we'd hear like, oh, you need to stop being in the clouds so much, or it's like you've got an overactive imagination, all of these things that we would hear that over time you integrate that and you associate that and say, oh well, I need to be this way in the world, and some of that magic kind of just, yeah, gets put to the side a little bit. But if we're only taking in that 1.6% of whatever is happening around us based on these associations and life scripts, like what's it like even just to set the intention to be open to more of that, to say, I don't know what's important here. And I think that's part of channeling too, right? To say, I don't, I'm going to trust that if I'm open to it, if I'm a channel, that things will come through that I may not deem are relevant, but are maybe relevant to the journey or the big picture or the person sitting in front of me that I'm trying to connect with. Um, yeah, so I feel like even setting that intention in a way can be open up kind of new worlds, and or having a curiosity to say, I don't know, and like how powerful that could be, even to take it the other way. I don't know can shut us down, but sometimes it might even, if we do it with curiosity, it might open us up to something more. I don't know what's going to come through. I don't know what's going to happen right now. I'm just going to be present with it. And then there's that um, self-consciousness that comes through sometimes too. Like for somebody who's actually trying to be a channel or do a reading for someone, I know that's a common hang up of like, what if I ask for answers and nothing's there and I just get silence? And then that critical mind comes in and starts trying to make things up, and then you're not channeling anymore because you're out of time and you're stuck with the critical voice. So it's like how to be in presence, how to trust, how to be curious and open. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. And it makes sense to open it up to not just, oh, it's channeling, but it's just hearing my own wisdom and being present and playing in the garden, or like we were just talking about, and being open to that. And as you were speaking, Tim, it did bring up one of the things that for me was tough at initially was that, like, well, what if I'm just making all of this up? And then the other thing was, well, what if this is something that doesn't have my best interest at heart? And it's like, for me at least, what I realize is it's all a part of me. And then also you can set a boundary, you can set with intentions, how you would like it to go. And then to just be like, okay, maybe I am making this up. And I think you even sort of were inferring that earlier, Tim, like just saying, well, yeah, let's just get curious. And maybe I am making it all up, but wow, that information was pretty potent.
It's like our human potential, to be able to tap into more of who we are and
Mhm.
to do it in a way that isn't constantly triggering those child parts that have been told that we're making it up or been told that we're bad for having the sixth, to 30th sense. It's fascinating, right? Like I think about all of the times that children have these experiences, and instead of normalizing them, we have all of this programming around, trying to be normal. And this is normal. It's like, how can we help? We're choosing to making it normal and choosing to help others step more into their who they are, their normalcy. And channeling is just, it's organic. It's who we are. It's not something metaphysical or, you know, bad or wrong.
Could you imagine the world if we were all just so tapped in that we were just all very present with that wisdom within? I mean, my God. I mean, I can imagine it, actually.
There's I don't know why this is coming up, and hopefully it will make sense, but there's an authentic relating game where you say if you're in a circle of people where you go from one person to the next and everybody tells a one line story. One time I hiked down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon or something, and then people can react to that. And you go to the next, somebody tells a story. But one of the poignant, powerful things about that is usually a facilitator will stop about halfway through the circle and then ask everyone who hasn't gone yet, how many of you have been sitting here thinking about what you're going to share? And everybody puts their hands up. I mean, even as a facilitator, I do it too because there's that desire to want to belong, to feel interesting, to feel like you got to come up with something that's going to be the best share ever, all of that. But it's that nature of those expectations and pressures we put on ourselves to take us out of present moment. And there's this implicit or implied idea that we also don't trust ourselves to be able to come up with something on the spot. So we're always planning ahead, we're always anticipating. It's probably that survival mechanism that happens in us. And but just an interesting thing to presence that, because once you know you're doing that, then it becomes a practice and it's like, okay, I'm going to return my attention. And then the game changes to whatever you share when it's your turn. It's got to be something that you're coming up with on the spot. So if you had something in your mind, you have to let that go and do something new, and creating that trust in ourselves to be tuned in to what's happening around us, and to allow that idea, yeah, allow that trust that we can be natural storytellers, that we can be connected, that these things can come through us. And it's just such an interesting shift when you move into that space of presence, especially in a group context, because then you go from everybody telling their individual stories to having a shared experience and shared reactions on the spot that aren't about that critical voice anymore. So almost in a way, it's like I'm trying to normalize that. It's almost like a group channeling that happens when you do those kinds of exercises.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'd love to try that in our Patreon group
Yeah,
sometime. Yeah, and art too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big thing in like the teaching of Elaine Aron's highly sensitive people work is she talks about that, how we get into that place of trying to overanalyze, or as children, it's like we would know like we're the ninth down in the reading list. So we would be, focusing on whatever it was. And how many women and men I've seen that like that is their go-to. So they can't stay in present time because that anxiety of needing to be, to belong and to not look like we're a hot mess, and how much anxiety that causes that takes us out of time. And one of the ways that I love telling people like how to start shifting that is to touch your body,
Mm,
like in breath work, which I think is another channeling. It's another way that you can really open all of your channels at one time, senses, sound, smell, etc. Is in the sharing, I have them just touch their heart and just see, well, what would your heart want to say, not your head? And it's fascinating how it brings people into presence versus that over analyzing, storytelling, ego mind
Mhm.
that takes us out of present time.
That reminds me of this exercise I came across the other day about the wise mind process. And I don't know it well enough to speak to it, but one of the questions in that, which is just seems like an all around like amazing question, even like you say, asking your heart in any given situation, saying, I wonder what my wise self would have to say about this. And then just
mm,
allowing space to see what comes through. It's almost like an invitation, an immediate invitation to channel. And I think most people can relate to that on some level. However, their belief system allows them to relate to a wise self. We all have some concept of wisdom or of that higher self or that part of us that is more knowing, more trusting, whatever that is. I wonder what my wise self would say in this moment. Yeah.
love that.
Someone once said my elder, like if I was to ask my elder, and I love that too.
Hmm.
It's like that part that knows beyond this moment and space and time. And yeah, I really love that, accessing that.
Even as we're talking, I feel I feel my own space around me and in my body. I feel things shifting. Like I feel an elevation happening just because I'm working on being very present as we're talking, the three of us.
Hmm.
And I really look forward to bringing this into like a group setting in the coming weeks. Um, it's going to be incredible.
Mhm.
I love this almost as a transition. I'm going to see if I can move us into a part two if you all are okay with that. But before that, just presencing, yeah, I feel that as well. Like that idea we could say we're channeling right now because we're just present with each other. We're talking about that magical experience and we're normalizing it. And then just in that you all are so somatic in your approach to things, there's that idea of like these things live in our body. And when we create that presencing, what does it feel like to be in that flow state? And it's like I know right now I feel it. I feel a little tingling in my feet. I feel a little bit of a pressure behind my third eye area. I feel spatially like things have changed. And I think part of that is when we get out of that 1.6% that we're taking in that you mentioned, Cassie, it's like when our brain starts opening up to the possibilities, it's also opening up to the fact that there's more information floating around us. When we have curiosity, it's looking for things that might be important instead of discarding them automatically. And in that sense, um, when we think about intuition or whatever, I know when someone tells me something, I don't know that it's factually true, but if someone tells me something that they really believe, it's their depth and their experience that this is true to their core, I feel it as a tingling or a uplifting in my spine. almost like someone lifting me up. And someone could say that that's metaphysical or energetic, and maybe it is. I kind of believe that it is, but it's also that idea that our nervous system and our processing mind is opening that door enough to let that information in, and we have to integrate it somehow. So it's giving us a different experience. But yeah, moving us into part two, because we've normalizing the idea of channeling.